Hey there everyone, welcome to Tales in Text and I'm your host Nisha and welcome to a Mahabharata video. So as you can see, the books on my table right behind me are the BORI critical edition of the Mahabharata translation by Dr. BORI. And those of you who have followed my channel in the past, any time in the past 4.5 years, you'll know that we went on an incredible, insightful, and just fun journey reading through the BORI critical edition of the Mahabharata, and we discovered so many new things and just learned a lot about the epic, which a lot of times don't make their way into the regional variants. So, as I was reading all of these books and over the course of 4.5 years, because yes, that's how long it took me to read these 11 books. And as you can see, all the colorful tabs on the books over here, all these little colorful tabs everywhere. That the research has been very intensive and very rigorous, and the going had been slow. So it's 4.5 years of consistent reading, and we finally completed all 11 books, which amount to more than 5,000 pages worth of reading, because each of the books is just massive books. So, as I was reading all these books in the past 4.5 years, I used to keep getting one particular question as a very common question from my viewers, from my audience, from all of you who have been following me and following my journey reading these books. And that one singular question, common question, was how do you read all of these books? I mean, the books are massive, and while the language isn't super technical, it is still a very dry writing in especially in the later part of the books. It's very dry. And how do you read it? Just the sheer magnitude, the volume, each book is more than 500 pages in length, and it's just how do you read it? How did you complete it? And yes, it took more than 4 years, but still, how did you read it? Because some of you who have also been going along with me on this journey, and you've also been reading these books at your end. I believe some of you are in the second book, some of you are in the fifth book. And I know you asked me once I finished, I'm still halfway through, or I'm still a quarter way through. I can't imagine how long it will take me to finish reading this. And you were all just so excited, and I was excited for you. But that's the common question that I used to keep getting when I was reading these books. And the more I thought about it, I felt like, okay, you know what? I think the time is right to just share my reading experience with all of you, so that if any of you want to pick up these books, or if you're going through these books right now and you feel like I could use a couple of suggestions and something to just sort of enrich your reading, or just make the time go a little faster, because I can completely empathize with all of you who are just trudging along through these books. Because yes, some of these books, especially in the latter half of the series, they're just very, very, very dry, and at some points just boring. So so I can completely empathize with all of you for that. So I wanted to take this video to kind of talk about some of the things that I did as part of my reading journey, so that if there's something that you can implement in your own reading, if you feel like it will be helpful to you, just go ahead and use it as a suggestion or a tip. Again, anything I say in this video is something that I have tried and tested myself. I've done it for myself, I've done it in my reading, and it worked for me. But of course, I completely understand that many of your lifestyles or many of your obligations might be completely different. Your work obligations, personal obligations might be different, your reading goals might be different, the objective of reading this series might be different, so, or time availability might be different than what I had. So not anything and everything that I share as a tip or a suggestion might be usable for you. So just take what works and leave the rest, and if nothing works, that's okay too. Thank you so much for watching this video though. All right, so grab something to eat, grab something to drink, sit down, and let's dive into the BORI critical edition of the Mahabharata and discuss how we can read this series. So the very first thing I want to say right off the bat is, especially for those of you who are planning to start out on reading this series, or you've just started out, or you're planning on getting these books and start reading, the very first thing I would say is, your very first tip or suggestion you could say is, just acknowledge that the reading is going to take time. It is going to take a lot of time. So these are 11 books, 10 books in the Mahabharata series itself, 10 volumes, and the 11th addendum or an additional volume, which is the Harivamsha. And so all of the books, each of the books, they are all in varying lengths, but they're all above, you know, the 450-500 page mark, with the highest or the longest books ranging up to around 800 pages. So I'm giving you these approximate numbers. So on the whole, you would be reading at least 5,500 pages. By the time you finish reading this entire series, you would have read at least 5,500 pages worth of literature. And not only is the sheer length of the series extremely long, and it's drawn out and very detailed, but even the writing is also sometimes difficult to get through. I always say this in my comments when anybody asks me how is the writing, is it difficult or is it easy. The vocabulary, the words used itself is not very hard, but it is dry at certain sections, especially in the sections where Bhishma and Yudhishthira have their conversations after the war, which is your right from Rajadharma Parva to Apada Dharma Parva, and then Moksha Dharma Parva, and certain sections after Moksha Dharma Parva, certain sections of the Bhagavad Gita, certain sections of the Harivamsha. All of these sections, they are very philosophical, and because they also introduce not just Indian philosophy or Sanatana Dharma philosophy, but they also introduce certain ideas and certain thoughts or certain ways of thinking, certain aspects of Indian philosophy or Hindu philosophy, which a lot of us may not be familiar with. So to kind of grasp all of these things and to understand what we're reading, it does take time. So right off the bat, I would request all of you to just mentally accept that you are going to take time. One of the things that I did when I was reading the critical edition of the Ramayana was that that was the very first time I was reading any critical edition, to be very honest. And I had not anticipated it to take a lot of time. It took me 1.5 years to finish the Ramayana critical edition. So I did a lot of mistakes, and I learned from those mistakes, and I incorporated the improvements or corrections while I was reading the Mahabharata, and therefore it kind of became a lot easier. But one of the mistakes I did there at that time when I was reading the Ramayana critical edition was that I assumed it's going to be a very smooth sailing, easy read. I did not realize how different the writing would be, or how different the text itself would be, the density of the text, the volume of the text. These are very dense texts. So you will take a lot of time. So just acknowledge it mentally so that you don't feel like giving up in the middle or giving up at any point in time, because sometimes you do feel like giving up. I felt so myself. So just mentally accept that it's going to take time, because then that will remove those mental blocks or those niggling doubts, about whether I should start or whether I should continue. You are going to reach the end. The Mahabharata also had an end. The war had an end. The Pandavas' life had an end, right? Even the gods who came down to the earth to get rid of evil, they also had an end to their mortal life and they went back. So every journey has its end, and this too shall finish and end at some point. It just might take a while. That's it. My second suggestion is look at each book individually. Don't consider these books or the series as one whole series. I mean, it is one whole series, and they are, or one whole story, one whole narrative. The Mahabharata, or originally called Jaya, it is one story, but because of the length and depth of the story, the translator, that is Dr. Bibek Debroy, had divided it into 11 volumes, because it's practically not possible to bind them all into one single text that will be readable by anybody. So out of a practical purpose, they've divided the story into individual books. But this is good for us, not just from a practical portability sense, but mainly because it allows you to read each book as an individual independent story arc or little section of story as one book. When you're reading this series, it can get very overwhelming just thinking about the sheer length of the books and how long it will take to finish reading, especially if you're in volume 1 or volume 2. You might think, I have so many more volumes to go till I reach Harivamsha. It's just nearly impossible. So it can be very overwhelming. So instead of looking at this as 11 books that are one single whole, look at them as each individual book. Consider volume 1 as one book and just focus on completing volume 1. So focus on each book individually so that you can celebrate the wins later. So when you finish volume 1, you have the satisfaction and that pride that, hey, I completed one whole book. And one book is down, let's move on to the next one. Don't think that there are 10 other books left. Think, okay, I'm moving on to volume 2, which is the second book. That's it. So think in terms of book, don't think in terms of the whole story. This will reduce any overwhelm or anxiety that you may experience while you're picking up these books. And you'll only look at each book as it is. For the longer books, because about the first 4 books, even the first 5 books, I would say are I would say much shorter compared to the last few books, especially volumes 8, 9, and 10. Especially 8 and 9 are very, very huge. When you go to the higher level books, that is the higher in the series, more like I would say deeper in the series, maybe you finished the war and you're moved into the volume 8 or volume 9, which are the core philosophical sections, the discussions between Bhishma and Yudhishthira, right? In those cases, because the books are almost 800 pages, they're 750, 780 pages in length, right? Don't consider that as an individual book itself. Look at it in terms of sections. Each of these books are divided into parvas, that is specific sections which deal with a specific topic or a theme. Consider each of those parvas as one unit and let your goal be, okay, within these days, I'm going to complete this one unit. What I'm basically saying is adjust your goal or adjust your perspective based on the size of the book, the length of the book. Because with these books, more than the language itself, it is the sheer volume, density, and length of the book that is going to be very daunting for most of us. For the books 8 and 9 especially, I was definitely anxious. I was wondering whether I can finish these books at all, forget let alone volume 10 and the Harivamsha. I didn't know how many years it's going to take me to finish, especially volume 9. Volume 9 was extremely difficult for me because it was the core philosophical section which dealt with extremely difficult moksha related topics. So at that time, what got me through was taking everything bit by bit. So scale down what your goal is. The bigger the book, the more complicated the book. Think smaller. Think each parva. Think each section within each parva. Think each chapter within that section, right? So just think small and let your goal be, I'm just going to complete so and so section within these number of days. And then you'll find it a lot easier to keep going ahead. My next suggestion is read every single day if you can and keep a reading goal for every single day. What I used to do was, and one of the main reasons I'm saying that you should try to read every single day if you can. I know that it is not humanly possible to read every single day because life happens. You may have work, you may be traveling, or for whatever reason you're not able to pick up these books. Life happens, right? And I can completely understand that it's not humanly possible to read every single day, but if you can, do try to read every single day. One of the main reasons I'm suggesting this is because one of the mistakes I made when I was reading the Ramayana critical edition was when I would feel a little overwhelmed by the density of the text. It is not, again, Ramayana is not as dense as the Mahabharata, but I only found out later that Mahabharata is a lot more dense because that was my very first time reading the Ramayana critical edition, right? That was different from all of the other Ramayana renditions that I had ever read before. So when I would feel like I needed a break, I would just stop reading for a couple of days, and then picking the book back up became a bit of a challenge. So I realized that I was not only losing the flow of reading, but also my motivation to continue and finish was also dwindling. So I realized that when I'm starting the Mahabharata, given that the number of books and the length of these books are much, much significantly higher than the Ramayana, I realized that I had to be consistent so that I don't stop reading. Because that's the worst that can happen. Because when you stop reading, you lose that flow and that connectivity of whatever you've experienced. Because these books, they really involve you, your mind and soul, they involve you completely. And you lose that connection, you lose that flow, which makes it very difficult to get back into the mindset of reading those books. So one of the things that I did while I was reading the Mahabharata was I made sure that I had a daily reading goal. I started out very simple. I had just a reading goal of 2 pages per day. Think one sheet that is front and back, 2 pages. That's it. Every day in the morning, I would wake up, and while I was having my coffee, for those 15 minutes, I would just read 2 pages. I started out like that. And then, as I slowly got into reading these books and I got used to reading these books, then I scaled up the number of pages that I'm reading. I started reading 4 pages a day, then 5 pages, 6 pages. But I did not exceed beyond those 6 pages. Weekdays, especially in the morning, I would give myself about from 15 minutes to 30 minutes in the morning while I'm drinking coffee. And my goal was to just read anywhere between 2 to 6 pages. That's it. In the weekends, during the weekends when I had the day off and my chores were done, I would make sure that I kept at least an hour aside, 1 hour minimum aside, to read anywhere between 10 to 20 pages. But this is kind of like how I was going about. Not every week was like I was able to do 20 pages. There were some weeks I was able to only do 10. There were some weeks I was able to do like 15. So even on the weekdays, some days I could just read 1 page because I just did not have time. But I always try to make sure that I did read something. So this way I had that momentum. I kept on consistently reading it. I didn't take my finger off the book, but at the same time, like, I wasn't forcing myself to finish like an x number of pages, like, you have to do this as a strict standard. I never kept that standard. I gave myself that space, anywhere between 2 pages to 6 pages on the weekday, and anywhere between 10 pages and 20 pages on the weekend. So I had that bandwidth to work with. I had that space to work with, so I could accommodate my personal life and my work life, everything, into that schedule, and then work and read around that schedule, so that I don't have to lose out on anything else or lose out on reading either. And I made sure that I also progressed through the books, and this actually really helped me get through, especially the later parts of the books, because the first, I would say, at least the first 6 to 7 books are really, really fast flowing. They're very interesting because a lot happens. And in the last 2.5 books, I would say 8, 9, and half of 10th volume 10, things just slow down so much, again, because it's all just theoretical discussions, philosophical discussions, very higher order discussions that most of us are either going to be unfamiliar with or just have limited knowledge of. So it slowed down so much. So this whole consistent reading technique really helped me just stick to it, because otherwise I would have, probably stopped reading at some point, because it was very hard going. I will be the first person to admit the last few volumes of the Mahabharata were very difficult, but this consistent reading actually made sure that I never stopped reading. Right? So my suggestion is, find your own rhythm. See, this technique, this schedule of 2 to 6 pages during the weekday and 10 to 20 pages during the weekend worked for me. Maybe for you another set of numbers would work. Maybe half a page to 2 pages on the weekday, because you're really busy and you have kids and you want to take, or you have early work that you need to get to, right? Maybe that would be your good number. On the weekends, up to 5 or 6 pages, because you have an active social life or you have a lot of responsibilities over the weekend. So, or you could even do higher. Maybe you could look at 10 pages during the weekday and up to 40 pages during the weekend. The sky is the limit. So experiment. Only if you try and experiment and you try out different combinations will you figure out which actually works for you. And when you figure out what works for you, just try and stick to it. My suggestion number 3 would be, accept that you will hit a reading wall and get into a reading slump. So a reading slump is basically the situation where, I'm sure, like, most of us readers have gone through this. I've gone through this so many times. Is when we hit these periods in our reading where we just don't have the interest to pick up a book at all and read. Just the mere sight of a book just annoys us, and we are just like mentally checked out of reading. We're like, just keep the book away, I don't want to read anything anymore. So that's a reading slump, and you just feel so bored when you look at any book. No book attracts your attention, no book interests you. A story or a series that you've been reading for some time that you've been really enjoying suddenly is, you start like resenting it or like finding it boring, and you just don't want to read it. Or there's a reading wall where, for example, you've reached halfway through a series and for some reason you're just not able to progress ahead beyond a particular limit. Either when you're reading it, like, you're getting distracted, or you're not able to understand something a lot, and then you're feeling like, okay, you know what, I'm not going to move ahead until I understand everything completely. So you're just staying at that one point, and it's like a brick wall. You can't scale it, you can't move beyond it, and it is just there like an obstacle in your path, and you just can't go beyond that point. So a reading slump or a reading wall happens to most of us readers. At least twice a year I experience it. I am saying this through personal experience. And with books like these, especially when they're so long and they're so detailed, they can be very textually heavy and dense. You are going to hit a reading wall, or you are going to get into a reading slump at some point in time. When I was reading the critical edition of the Ramayana, I hit a reading slump. Like, I would say, like 2/3 way through the book, and I just stopped reading for like 2 months, and it was one of the worst slumps ever. I just could not get myself to read it, and I was just kind of like reading all the other chota books that I had, but picking up the Ramayana again, like, it took me 2 months. And I did not want that to happen with the Mahabharata, because I mean, look at the number of books. I'm telling you guys, don't be anxious, but just thinking of my reading process, the whole thing just makes me remember all the anxiety that I had when I was reading these books. So I knew that I was going to get those reading slumps, I was going to fall into those reading slumps, I was going to hit those reading walls, and I knew that I had to be mentally prepared with a game plan to address that. So one suggestion that I can give, because this technique actually worked for me, was that when you feel like you're going into a reading slump or you've hit a reading wall, acknowledge that it's okay, it's all right, that you can get back on track, but try to read at least half a page every day, even then. I know it feels like, oh, it's just not possible, I can't look at another Mahabharata book again. You might feel that way, but do try to pick up and read at least half a page, or at least one paragraph. And the reason I'm saying this is, I know it might seem like a laughable idea, like, what, half a page, one paragraph, what is she saying? But trust me, when you are in a reading slump or you've hit a reading wall, even reading one word becomes the world's biggest challenge. Because mentally you're just so fatigued, because these books can be mentally fatiguing. And it just feels like, I just want to just take a break and just like leave it, and I'll come back later whenever. But sometimes that later whenever will either never materialize, or it's going to be a very long time away. And then you'll have lost that momentum, you'll have lost that flow, and that becomes a huge problem getting back into the books. And I'm saying this through personal experience. So I would suggest, try and read at least half a page, or at least 1 or 2 paragraphs, even then. Because then at least you're kind of inching along a little bit, and you're still not losing that connection with the book. If in case, this reading slump on this reading wall is just really bad, and you just cannot pick up the book at all, then accept that it's okay, I'm going to take a break, and just take a break of about 2 days. That's the max, I would say, like 48 hours. Okay, and promise yourself that at the end of that 48 hours, you are going to read one whole page. Right? Promise yourself and hold yourself to that promise. Actually accomplish that promise, fulfill that promise towards yourself. After that 48 hours break, come back and read it. Read that one page. Let that 48, and during that 48 hours, don't even go to look at the books. Don't look at the books, don't think about the books, don't think about the Mahabharata at all, right? Just go do something else. Watch Netflix, go out with your friends, go out with your family, go to the park, right? Go have something nice to eat and drink. Just do not think about these books. Just imagine like as if you don't have these books at all at home, right? So for those 2 days, your mind or your eyes should not fall upon these books. So you're completely clearing away that space, okay? And I've also seen that is, if this is something that you'd like to do, a lot of people do take these really tiny books that are only like 20 pages, 30 pages, really short books, very fast moving books, and they read it as palate cleansers between when they're sort of in a reading slump, in order to clear the palate, in order to clear their mind of whatever they've read, so that they can kind of take a proper break. So if you have a book like that, go ahead and read it. That's up to you. But you don't have to read anything at all. Just like take a complete break, 48-hour break from reading. That works too. And then after those 48 hours, just come back and read that one page. That's it, just one page. And then when you're picking it up again, you're reading after your reading slump, to try to get over that hump, just read one page every day. That's it. No more, no less. Just one page. And soon you'll realize that maybe a week after that, like you find that you're back into the rhythm and you want to pick up reading again. Then you can pick up the pace accordingly. So this is my third suggestion, that try to read during a reading slump, but if you can't, take a break and come back again. My next suggestion and tip that I could give is, make your reading interesting and more engaging by adding other activities along with it. So one of the things that I used to do is, one is annotating. As you can see, all the tabs are there. I used to annotate these books a lot. I would put the flags, the annotation flags. I would write in post-it notes. I would make notes of whatever things I used to think about, and whatever other additional research I used to do. I used to write it in post-it notes, and I used to paste it in the book itself. Then I used to actually maintain lots of journals. I have like 4 or 5 journals dedicated to the Mahabharata. For example, one journal is only about writing about the relationships between people, and like whose avatar is who, right? And all those things, I used to maintain that. Another book, entirely book, I have dedicated for volumes 5, 6, and 7 during the war, just to keep track of who fought against whom and who killed whom. So then I have actually kept a detailed record of which person fought against which person, Kaurava versus Pandava, how many people died at what point and all. So this actually helped me in multiple ways, because especially in this series, in the section of the war, there are certain sections where the text itself is a little confused in terms of who is killed and who is alive. So someone who had been killed in day 1 or day 2 suddenly seems to have again been reborn, and in the later days of like day 11, day 12. And so because I had manually kept track of everything, I could recognize this is a mistake, and I marked it in my book saying that nope, this person's dead on this particular day, so and so page in this volume of the book. So this really helped me there, and also helped me understand how the war, kind of get a real sense of the magnitude of the war, because when we're reading it, after some time, the war seems like white noise. But because I was writing this every single day, and I was writing down every single battle and every single death, I could kind of make this more real. From the page to the mind, the war became more real and more concrete. So I found that very interesting. Then I had another journal that I maintained for the entire philosophy section of the Mahabharata, that is the Raj Dharma, Apad Dharma, and Moksha Dharma Parva, where I wrote down all of the discussions between Yudhishthira and Bhishma. I would take the core messages, the questions that Yudhishthira asked, I would write down the question in my book, and then I would read the entire answer that Bhishma would give, and then I would take the main points and I would write it in bullet points underneath that. So I have written down the entire philosophical portion of it in that one notebook, that big notebook that I have. So now if I want to go back and reread the philosophy section, I don't need to search for certain information in the Mahabharata, in those whatever, like 700 plus pages over 3 books. Right now I can just go back to my notebook, and I've written down the page numbers as well, where the actual conversation happens related to those questions. So I can just read the summary that I have written, and if I want more information, I can go to the page number in that particular volume and then read for it, like in more greater detail. So I've done like so many different like notebooks and journals that I had, and there was a time when in the first few volumes, I would say like the first 4 volumes, I had an art journal also, where I would like take cut out pictures that I would find in the newspapers or magazines, or I would take printouts of things that I was like researching about, and I would paste it in my journal, and I would write notes, and I would do decorations and all that. So all of these were just a way for me to kind of enjoy and like immerse myself more in the Mahabharata, and to understand the text better, to engage with the text better. But what also happened, which I realized after I finished reading the entire series, is that because I was doing all of these things, my focus was not just on only reading. I was interacting with the text through multiple mediums and multiple formats. And because this happened, I the kind of monotony that would otherwise set in was not there, because I was always taking breaks like every 5 to 6 minutes to note down something, or to write down a question that I had on a post-it note, or to make notes from the book itself into my notebook. So I would always like take those breaks, so that would reduce the monotony or any boredom that I would have, and then I would again go back and jump into the text again. So I realized this after I finished reading the series, that all of these techniques of journaling, note taking, annotation, art journaling, all of these actually really helped me reduce the monotony that otherwise would set in, especially in the last few books. And I keep mentioning these last few books because the last 8, 9, and 10 are a bit of a struggle, especially 8 and 9. They are a bit of a struggle, because the text is just very, very, very theoretically dense. So all of these things actually helped me kind of go ahead and like overcome that monotony, overcome that boredom, and just stick to reading, and making sure that I didn't kind of stop reading at any point, even when I hit a reading slump, because which did happen sometime when I was reading volume 9. I had one reading slump early on, sometime around book 4. Then after I finished reading that, I had the reading slump again in book 9. So this time all of these techniques really helped me. So what you could do is you could also try some of these techniques to see if they work for you. Now I understand that these are quite time consuming, research intensive techniques that not everybody might want to go ahead and do those. If that's the case, then that's okay, you don't need to try these out. A couple of other things that you can do is you can make this like an Instagram journey. You can share updates on Instagram with your friends and family and your followers, and like talk to them on Instagram about how you're going through each of the sections and how the journey is going through. You can start a podcast, you can write a blog, you can do a YouTube series like how I did this YouTube series, and just connecting with all of you was also one of the biggest ways that helped me get through these books. Because there were times, especially in the last few books, where I was like, oh my god, I need to take a break. But then I knew that a lot of you were waiting for my reviews, and you all gave me that encouragement to continue and keep reading. So having this online community was really helpful for me as well. So maybe it might help you too, right? Or you sit and discuss this with any of your family members or your friends who are also interested, maybe your grandparents who are interested in the scriptures. So the sky is the limit, right? You can do a lot of these things. So kind of like bringing all of these other activities and involving them into your reading will really smooth out the reading process for you as well. So try it out. My next suggestion deals exclusively with the philosophical sections of the book, and the sections which are very hard to read. These sections are predominantly, like I say, philosophical. They deal with, for example, the Bhagavad Gita section or the other Gitas. So a lot of people have this understanding that the Bhagavad Gita is the only or main Gita in the Mahabharata, but that's not actually true. The Bhagavad Gita is one of many Gitas that are there. Gita means the song. So anything that is profound and that is sung is considered to be a Gita, and that gives a lot of message, that shares important messages for the listeners. So Bhagavad Gita is one of those Gitas, but there are other Gitas too. So all of these Gitas, the parvas that deal with philosophy, the parvas that deal with a lot of geographical descriptions and travel, some of these can be very hard to get through. Some, for example, the philosophical sections, the ideas itself are very obscure, and there are a lot of times that there were some things that I kind of like recognized, because either it dealt with certain Hindu practices that we follow even today, or they're practices that I have read about in other books. But there were equally other things, other philosophical concepts or other religious concepts that I had no idea about, and which became like very difficult for me to understand. So I would spend some time trying to like sit down, understand, research more, and then write more about it. So that took quite some time for me, and that like slowed down the way I was reading. But there were certain elements in this section itself, in this philosophy itself, where no matter how much research I did, because the concepts itself were very, very difficult, and I don't come from a philosophy background. I'm not an expert on philosophy at all. And in fact, I've just recently purchased a History of Indian Philosophy Volume 1. I want to show you this here. So this is the book. So I just recently got this book. So this book, I wanted to get this because after I read the Mahabharata, I was like, okay, I need to understand what's going on with the philosophy of Sanatana Dharma, because I just don't have a lot of clue in terms of all of the various aspects in Hindu philosophy. So there were sections where I did not understand some of the things that I read. So instead of just pausing there for an obscure amount of time or indefinitely, I just marked down those pages in terms of where I need to come back and revisit, and I just went ahead. So my next suggestion is, if there is any section that you don't understand, try to research, give it a try. I will always say try to research first. Speak to people, read about it, maybe speak to your priests, whoever you trust, or do your own online research, right? Or speak to experts. But if you still feel like, hey, I'm a little confused, I don't really understand what's going on, I don't understand this fully, maybe I understood it partially but not completely, or I still have a few more doubts, don't pause your reading or don't stop your reading and don't stay there, right? Just mark those pages out, either fold the page or like mark it in your in the book itself, or write down the page numbers in the back. You have some extra empty pages in the back to take notes in each book itself. So there you can just mark down the pages where you want to come back and revisit and reread in the future. Don't stop indefinitely. Pause for some time, do your research, try to figure it out. But if it feels like it's a lot, it's okay to move on. Just mark those sections and come back some other time in the future, right? Don't stop and spend time on sections which are extremely hard because sometimes what happens is, when we are unable to understand what's going on in that particular philosophical section, because a lot of this philosophy needs previous background information, context, understanding, advice from other people who may actually be following these precepts, right? And and we may not have access to all of that at that very moment when we're reading it. So it's difficult to actually grasp what we're reading. So instead of just staying and pausing in that moment until you completely understand, just move on. Now I know the question will come, but hey, then if you're reading it without understanding, what's the point of reading it? That's a valid question, I agree. But the objective here is basically not to spend too much time trying to make sense of just one particular thing, when that one particular thing, the understanding of it might be related to so many other things that are not there in the book. Because what Bhishma is talking about to Yudhishthira, one thing that we have to really understand with the Mahabharata, especially that section, their conversation is, Bhishma and Yudhishthira are already talking with a particular level of knowledge of practices, philosophy, what is dharma, what is adharma. They already come to the conversation with a certain level of knowledge and experience and understanding in mind. They wouldn't be like all of, or rather, I wouldn't say they wouldn't be like many of us who are today are not as well versed in philosophy or dharmic knowledge. Now, as humans, we may know what may be moral and what may be immoral in certain aspects of living, but our knowledge of the scriptures may not be at that level, right? So they are already at a very high level of understanding, and they are talking as experts who are talking to each other. The questions that Yudhishthira asks and the answers that Bhishma gives, they're all very higher order question and answers. And so for all of us to reach that level itself, we need to do a foundation work. We need to do basic research. We need to do a lot of foundational reading, foundational note taking. We need to understand what all of these things are, and then we can reach their level of conversation to fully and truly understand what they're talking about. So we may understand some things right now, but we would getting a 100% complete grasp, complete correct grasp of every single thing that they're talking about, that's a bit hard, and that does take time. And as we grow older, as we experience life more, we will also have newer perspectives and more nuanced perspectives of what they're talking about and what they're discussing, and so that will change our perspective of the text itself. So instead of fixating on one particular point for a long period of time, and then which might ruin your flow of reading as well, just mark those sections, come back to it later, right? Come back to it after you finish the book, come back to it after you finish the series, come back to it 10 years later. It's fine, it's okay. So that will ensure that you don't feel too anxious about, oh my god, I'm not understanding what's happening, oh my god, how will I finish the book if I can't understand it. So all those anxieties will also be reduced. My final suggestion or tip is, after you finish reading each book, celebrate the win, because it is a big deal. And I know it may feel like, hey, I've just finished volume 1, there are like 10 more volumes here, what is she talking about celebrating? No, don't have that mindset. Celebrate the win, celebrate the fact that you have sat down and read an entire volume of this, because it's not easy, it is difficult. The kind of commitment it takes a lot of effort, right? And the fact that you have managed your work obligations, your personal obligations, your health, your other time commitments, and you've still read this book, that's a big deal. That is a massive deal, and you should be very, very proud of yourself. So celebrate the win, right? You should be proud of yourself, so celebrate the win. So you could like I said, you can post it on Instagram or YouTube and say that, hey, look, I've finished reading this particular volume, and I'm so happy, and let others also prop you up and congratulate you for that, right? Or you can go and treat yourself. You're saying that if I finish this volume, I'm gonna go and get myself an ice cream or a slice of cake or a pizza, or whatever. I'm gonna go celebrate this victory out with my family or with my friends or just by myself, or I'm going to treat myself to a book, maybe the second volume, or to another book. I'm gonna go and gift myself something. So celebrate that win, because with each passing book that you go through, the density of the book increases, the emotional upheavals in the book increase, the kind of concentration it requires, all of that will also increase tremendously. So it becomes harder and harder to read the text in itself as you progress, and it does take a lot of effort to complete reading it, and you deserve to be congratulated and celebrated for actually reading these books. So celebrate each win, right? And if you want to take a break between each book, volume 1 and volume 2, if you want to take a break, like I said, 48 hours, take that break, just mentally cleanse, read another short book to as a palate cleanser. Trust me, it does help. I was reading these small books alongside all of these books as well, and I finished a lot of small books as part of my reading, because they helped act as palate cleansers, because I didn't want to fix it only on these books itself. So I used to read other books in between, so that kind of like I had that break as well. Mentally I had that break. So do that as well. So just enjoy, make the process enjoyable, right? And as part of this celebrating the win, I think I just want to say that I've spoken a lot about how these books did give me some anxiety when I started reading it and I was going about, and I know from a lot of my comments that I receive on these videos that some of you are also feeling anxious about how I'm going to finish reading. All I say is, what, don't be anxious. Don't make reading so serious that it becomes a burden instead of a boon. Don't make it a burden, make it a blessing, right? Reading is supposed to be fun. And I get it. I completely empathize with all of you who are saying, I'm feeling a little anxious that I can't finish this book, or will I ever finish this book, or when will I finish these books? I get it. I was in that whole mental frame for 4.5 years. 4.5 years of my life I've spent on these books. And it is an experience that I have cherished every single moment. And I love it. If I could do it again, I would do it again. In fact, I am doing it again, because I think you would have seen my video about Kisari Mohan Ganguly's books that I've just recently picked up, and I want to start rereading the Mahabharata from his translation, right? So I love this experience. And through the ups and downs that I have experienced while reading all of these books, I've realized that anxiety does come. It's a natural human thing. Doubt does rise, right? We will hit reading slumps and reading walls. But the point is to just enjoy the process, to give ourselves to the books, and to just see where the book takes us, right? And if things become very overwhelming, just step away. It's okay. I know I've said 2 days because that is what worked for me. But if you need more than 2 days, please go ahead and take it. Take a week, take a month. It's okay. But come back. And the books are patient. You know, the Mahabharata, the Jaya, has been around in our country, in our culture for thousands and thousands of years. It has been very patiently waiting for newer generations of listeners and readers to engage with this and to learn from it. And it will wait for us even if we take a month or two's break to kind of recuperate and then come back to the story, right? So take your time, enjoy, have fun. Okay, and if any of you are reading these books, you know, do come on to my videos, either this video or the book specific videos that are there, and just share your experience of reading. You know, if you want to discuss something in the book, you know, I'd love to discuss it in the comment section. Do comment on and about the books that you're reading. Do share your experience. You know, just let me know how your experience has been going. You know, let me know, do you want to pick up these books? Have you finished reading these books? What has your experience been? I'd love to hear from all of you. And for all of you who have stuck around with me for so many years as part of this series, thank you so much for being a part of my community and for being one of the reasons that always motivated me to keep going on and keep completing each book. Thank you so much. And do continue to, you know, watch my videos, subscribe to my channel, enable the notification button so you don't miss out on any other amazing videos that I post. And I'd love to hear from you soon. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.